All right, so welcome to another online workshop for STS. I'm your host and my name is Marissa Chan. Today we are meeting with Doug Chan. Doug lives in San Francisco and I chose him because he has dual interests, which I felt would make for a great story for students to learn about. So welcome, Doug. How are you?
Thanks, Marissa. Thanks for having me. Doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. So um, I see your setup here in your background, and I know that you work with computers. Is that safe to say, computers? Like more
Yeah,
specifically, would it be programming?
computers. Yeah, mostly my day-to-day is all about programming.
So software, but then your
Yep,
your other love would be music, right?
totally. Yeah, it's always been kind of 50-50 for me how I started, and I feel like I've always done a little bit of both.
Okay.
At some points it's 50-50, some points it's more one or the other. But I would say these days I'm more of a programmer than I am a musician.
So when you were younger, how did you deal with having to choose? I mean, I'm sure it felt like you had to choose at some point. So how did you manage that?
Yeah, it's weird. I think it really boils down to who you surround yourself with. When I was growing up, I was part of my community band. And the community band, shout out to Guam Territorial Band, they, the people I hung out with, they were educators and they were a nonprofit. So not only was I kind of steered towards also kind of doing a little bit of music education, teaching lessons, and also performing. They also needed websites, so and like a way to organize their music library. So when I was younger, I'd always done a little bit of programming, but not really professionally, just as a hobby since I'd say I was about 9 years old. So
How did you
um,
even
yeah,
start that at 9 years old? Like, what do you do? How do you begin? Like, what?
yeah, yeah. Again, it all goes back to who you're surrounded with. My uncle, my parents were very hardworking and always working, but my uncle also lived with us. He had bought us our first home computer when I was 9 years old, and he was also in the tech industry back. This is like early '90s, and then the computer, obviously we had games on it, but we also had, some of his stuff on it, which was like, it had BASIC, which was a programming language that was tailored for people starting programming, and also had some of his like C and other things that I could play around with. So yeah, my uncle was a big inspiration for me to, and a big help by buying that computer and helping us with that to get me started on that route at a very young age.
So how would you describe the way that you built your skills up from using something so basic in the your younger years to get you where you're at now? I mean,
Yeah,
how do you
that's
keep that going?
so how I built my skills. I would say it became like a hobby. As got into late middle school, early high school, the websites started to become a big thing. Like, I don't know if people remember like GeoCities, where you can kind of easily build
Mhm.
your own websites and with using basic HTML and stuff like that. So I started building simple websites when I would say like 12 or 13, for like some like video game themed or you know for people that I was playing video games with. We had like guilds and clans and stuff like that. So I applied my my interest into something that was more of a hobby, and I guess that just turned into something bigger later in life that I hadn't ever expected.
But then at the same time, there was also music, right? And your first instrument is sax.
Yeah, the first instrument I took seriously was saxophone. My parents made us play piano at a very young age, starting like 4 years old, 5 years old. And as much as I wasn't super into piano, my parents kept us going at it for, until I was like 18, so 14 years. I never got really good at piano, but in middle school when they made us pick an instrument for band, that's when I started to see the value. Like that's when I started to really take an interest in music. And I still never really got good at piano, but when it came to saxophone, I liked the idea that I got to play with other people because piano is a very like, you just play by yourself, um, at least, in the traditional sense. And yeah, I really liked collaborating with others. I liked that we also got to play like solos and, with different ensembles.
So by middle school, you chose sax, and by that time, roughly, how much time were you giving to the instrument in order to really feel like this was yours and this was something that you enjoyed? How much practice time are we talking per week at this point in middle school?
We were fortunate enough to have band every day. I feel like a lot of music programs have band maybe like 2 or 3 times a week. But we were fortunate enough to have band every day. My first 2 years, sixth grade, seventh grade was more rudimentary. I wasn't really like super into music. But by the time I got to eighth grade, I started feeling like I was getting somewhere. So the short answer would be like about 3 years. And then after that, I had started to branch out from school band. And that's when I joined the community band and, took off from there.
So by the time you entered high school, you probably had like a whole lifetime, minus 4 years because you started when you were 4. You basically had a whole lifetime of music by the time you entered into high school, into a high school music program. And so that took off at the same time you were still on the computer.
Totally, yeah. So, it was all just like I said, what I was surrounded with. So I just did music because all my friends were doing music too, and that was lots of fun. When I wasn't doing music, I was like either playing video games or making websites for those video games, and or even tools around like rankings and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
or rosters, which translated eventually into making like a roster, um, organizer for the band website. So yeah, that it all kind of like converged somehow together, and it was all just basically just I wouldn't say out of necessity because we didn't need them, but it was something that I just
Mm-hmm.
went for because I had the skills.
And so fast forward to high school graduation, did you find yourself thinking about college, or like what route did you end up taking?
So after high school, my dream as a kid was always to work for a company like Blizzard or like like a video game program to be a video game programmer. Um, so it was weird because I started out as practical, so I started out wanting to study engineering. So I did that for a couple of years, and admittedly, it wasn't what I thought it was. So I did end up switching my major to music at that point, which I don't know, maybe I was young and I lacked discipline, but I feel like music is what gave me more discipline, especially in school, because you have like 3 recitals a quarter, which is like 6 recitals a year. On top of your group recitals are like the more of the solo stuff, where then you have your
Mm-hmm.
ensemble stuff. That was the group stuff. Sometimes you even have chamber stuff, which is like small group stuff.
Yeah.
And
So I mean,
all at the same time,
at this point, when you switched out, you started, what was your major when you first started college?
my first major was computer engineering.
Computer engineering. And at this point, at the switch, what would you say would be the highest level math that you've completed?
In high school, I took up to calculus,
Okay. And
or I think it was pre-cal. I think I did take calculus. I don't know, remember for sure, but it was one of those.
so going into as a freshman in college, you were basically ready to start at calc or even pre-calc your freshman year, also because you were admitted to an engineering program.
Totally, yeah. I did start. I think I chose to take the primer, like I think like either intro to calculus or one of those classes, just to make sure I had a solid foundation for what was to come.
Mm-hmm. So would you say that the math and the level of math that you've had experienced up until this point helped you with the work that you've been doing, creating websites and programming? Like, what was your skill level at this point? Like, what did you learn new?
Yeah, that's thanks for putting me on the spot. First of all. Second of all,
I
that's a
mean,
very
right,
complex.
you only have to look back at so far, right? Like, I mean, you had calculus under your belt up at, at this time, but like, so what were some of the things that you were doing at that time?
Yeah, that's a very
Because
complex
GeoCities went away,
question. Totally. They did go
right?
away, that is
It was
true.
what, Friendster
Um,
and MySpace around that time, I think.
that's right. Everyone moved to MySpace. Um,
So
yeah,
did you
that's a very
kind of take
complex
a break?
question. I think math really did help me, not because it's one of those things like, why do I have to learn these calculus formulas? I'm never going to use them in real life. It's not that kind of thing. It's more of, how do I take these problems with formulas and solve them? How do I use this formula and then have this problem and come up with a solution? And over
Hmm.
time, calculus, you learn more and more formulas. So it's like halfway through the book, it's like, I have this problem. Which formula do I use to get the
Would
solution?
you say you would need calculus though to do the work that you're doing today?
Not specifically. And I think I toy with the idea of the short answer is, it really did sharpen my critical analytical skills, but I
Hmm.
don't specifically use calculus for what I do. Um, so if that answers your question.
Okay. Yeah, so let's follow the story. So you changed your major from computer engineering to music.
After 2 years, correct.
Okay, and then you majored in music, got a bachelor's in music. And what did you do after you graduated with a bachelor's in music? What kind of jobs did you have available for that?
Yeah, so I was lucky, I think 2 or 3 years into my music program, that I met, I was still hanging around with educators, and then I got my start teaching private lessons. So after I was done with music, after I graduated, my main source of income was teaching lessons. I think by the time I graduated, I had 5 students.
Hmm.
I kind of wanted more,
Hmm.
but my studies came first, so I need to make sure I have time to practice. I need to make sure I have time for all my tests and music theory, and I was still taking like some math and all that other stuff. So I was not teaching too much, but after college was done, I'm like, okay, that's great. I have like all this free time, um,
And it's
and
sort
where
of
I was
like
living.
you have like your own business now too, right?
Totally. After high school, I opened up a studio. I was in a pretty decent position because in my house we were wanting to build an extension for a long time, and then I feel very lucky and a little privileged to have that option, to have my parents support me in that way, to build an extension out of my house to create a music studio for teaching. If I didn't, I could have easily went to look for office space.
Hmm.
Um, it definitely would have been a little bit harder, but the bottom line is that I was excited to really start up a music school, start teaching more, work with some of my friends to build up the local music community, and
Okay.
teach more.
So it sounds like being a music teacher, there's like endless opportunity for you to earn money and sustain yourself if you have some business sense and time management and a lot of skill, because at this point you're teaching many students who aren't only playing sax. Am I right? Are you only taking students who play sax?
Um, it was tricky because coming from Guam, I was the only, not the only, but one of the few sax teachers. And I don't think people could find beginner teachers for clarinet and flute. So what happened was I took that as an opportunity to teach clarinet and flute lessons at a much cheaper rate. but
Mm-hmm.
also learn the instruments myself. So I think they could have found other teachers, but I took that challenge upon myself because like maybe I was teaching the older sibling saxophone and the younger sibling wanted to learn clarinet, but the parents didn't want to bring them to two different places, just bring them to one place. So I took all those challenges to myself and really said, okay, I'll learn clarinet or flute along with along with your kid, and I'll charge a cheaper rate. But eventually that the discipline and the convenience for them and just the hard work ended up letting me learn all those different instruments.
So that led, like you said, that led to you learning pretty much just about every instrument that there is to learn.
Band instruments, yeah, over time. It definitely wasn't overnight.
Not
Many years
violin.
of, yeah.
Could you
Correct.
teach
Not until grad
violin?
school. Not until grad school, but yeah, that was much later.
So I want to share so everyone can see a sample of your work. But this is Doug playing Silhouette by Kenny G.
I'm not sure. Is your audio coming through, Marissa?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I'm not hearing the audio on my end.
Oh, you're not?
Yeah.
All right, let's try this again.
Oh.
Here's Doug playing just about every instrument for the song. What do you think about this? Do you remember this?
This is one of my more recent videos.
Yeah. I mean, you've got like guitar, you've got drums, you've got your soprano sax. Is that even what it's called?
Oh yeah, that's the soprano saxophone.
Wanted to make sure I still remembered the names of instruments myself.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
So I'm gonna stop that just so that we can move on and everyone can see like how nice it sounds and everything. Like it sounds like the real deal.
Thank you. Yeah, if you want to check out my YouTube channel, that's a COUFU. And I have a lot of variety, like little classical, some band music, and there's some smooth jazz, as you just heard.
Well, that is cool. There's another one that I wanted to play. It's also of Doug. It's Flight of the Bumblebee. I thought that was like really fun for people to hear, like just how much skill you've acquired over the years. So let me just go back to sharing my screen. I'm like fidgeting around here with my Zoom, but I think people will enjoy. All right, so here you are on the far left. Do you remember what year this is?
Maybe 2006, 2007.
This is so fun. This is an older video of you, but it definitely, I think, shows like, how old were you in 2006? Gosh, you were like
23.
in your 20s, right?
Yeah, early 20s.
And this was while you were getting your degrees, you were earning your degree at this time, right?
Yeah, I was a bit of a late bloomer. I took my time getting through.
Okay. So again, it's Doug on the far left of the screen playing Flight of the Bumblebee. All right.
Cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. So let's fast forward to today. Obviously, you're not in Guam. You're in San Francisco now. I mean, what's going on? You got your music degree, and what happened? Here you are, not
Yeah. So
touching music so much. What are you doing right now?
Yeah, so in San Francisco, I'm working as a web developer. Um, it continued to take a step back a little bit. When I first moved off of Guam like 3 years ago, I still took 50-50 route when I went for
Mm-hmm.
my master's in music education, and that was in Boston. And then uh, I I did some web work in Guam,
Mm-hmm.
some contract work here and there, but I never made a full-time job out of it. So when I was in Boston getting my music degree, I found myself needing some cash to get by. So I did also um, find full-time work as a web developer in Boston as well. And I think at that point, when I first moved, my intention was going full-time music. But again, I found myself somehow getting pulled in both directions. And I think that's the important thing to realize is you don't have to choose one or the other. If you have different things going on, you can easily do both. And I was, doing great in Boston, doing a little bit of teaching, doing a little bit of performing, full-time student, full-time work. It was pretty cool. So
So
after that,
you
when I
were
moved to San Francisco,
so just hold up a second. So while you were in graduate school at BU, you were using web developing on the side to help support yourself while you were earning your graduate degree in music. So
absolutely.
you
And
kind of leaned on one when you were working on another, and that's how it's been so far for you.
totally. Actually, I'm glad you bring that up too, because I met a lot of people who also
Mm-hmm.
were double majors. I think they also had some inner conflict of what to choose. Do I choose this or that? And maybe if you're willing to work hard enough, you don't have to choose. You can choose both. And I think it really helped round out their college experiences because there was this like physics PhD candidate who was also majoring in music, and um, so many different kinds of people double majoring in music. And I think that sounds like a lot of work, but in the end, I think that helped force them to not only do the hard work of a more academic major, but also be forced to do something like music, which they still love, that could help round out their education and overall college experience.
That's pretty cool. So, I mean, at this point, you've sort of figured out how to use both, right, to help you.
Yeah, but with programming, I was self-taught. Like I said, I had like small jobs here and there, but I never had a full-time job in tech. So I accepted a junior position. They respected my knowledge for being self-taught, but I definitely had a lot to learn. But
Mm-hmm.
I was surrounded by such helpful coworkers, and they were very patient, and they were really good at figuring out what I did know and what I didn't know, and they were great mentors for filling in my knowledge for what I didn't know, and really ramped me up to where I needed to be to move to San Francisco to get a
So,
successful job here.
so what are some of the skills that you're using now? Like, you're all self-taught, you've learned some things from your job, you've got some on-the-job training. But I mean, what are we working with right now? Like, how would you just, what would you call the skills that you have now that you would put down on a resume?
So I keep two resumes. I keep a music resume and a programmer resume. Um, right now, I would say I'm 90 to 95% tech and like much less music. I was teaching a little bit out here, some private lessons for a while, but that started getting a little bit hard when my job was getting more stressful. So I liked my weekends free. I was teaching on weekends, by the way. So I think it really depends on what you really want to go for.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like for music, not only are you performing a lot, but you're also practicing a lot. So I feel like in tech, not only are you working a lot, but on the off hours, you still have to quote unquote practice.
Mm-hmm.
Technology is moving so fast, and if you're not learning new things all the time, then you're gonna fall behind with everyone else that's continuing to learn. And I think in the end, even though I'm not doing music right now, I do have music to thank for that, for helping me build that discipline to carry over to this side.
Cool. All right. So, any last advice that you would like to give to students who maybe are struggling with having 2 or 3 things that they really enjoy and maybe feel like they have to choose?
Yeah, my recommendation is just go for it. Go for both, you know, like as long as they're not too stressful things. One can be like academic, one can be a little bit more like a hobby. They said be careful making a hobby your job because it might end up becoming something that you don't like doing. But I find the opposite's true. You know, if you want to study baking, if you want to study cooking on the side, or anything like not non-academic, that can really help round out your educational experience. You don't have to choose. Just go for it.
Well, great. This was fun. Thanks
Yeah.
for letting us interview you today and talking to us about not having to choose between 2 things that you enjoy doing for work.
Totally. Thanks for choosing me for your videos, Marissa.
Yeah, no problem. All right. Have a good day. Take care.
You too. Bye bye.